May all beings be happy. May all beings be healthy. May all beings be free from harm. May all beings love life. May all beings awaken. Welcome to another Cuke Audio podcast. I'm DC, Poobah of Cuke Audio and Cuke Archives, doing our bit to help preserve the legacy of Shunryu Suzuki and those whose paths cross his, and anything else that comes to mind. I pray that you and yours are safe and comfortable, free from economic hardship, and able to get out and do whatever it is you want within the limitations of the universal precept of do as little harm as possible. So today we have a guest, Wendy Pirsig. Wendy first came to the Zen Center in, oh God, I can't remember exactly. I think it was about 1978 when the son of Robert Pirsig, her husband, and it's her stepson, was murdered a couple of blocks down the street. So we talk about that a little bit. We talk about her whole Zen path, and she's a Zen now, studying in the lineage of Shunryu Suzuki with Joan Amaral over there on the East Coast. Joan is the guiding teacher of the Zen Center North Shore in Beverly, Massachusetts. Wendy also has been a very active volunteer for Cuke Archives for years. And we talk about that some. She has, what she has focused on is working on the Shunryu Suzuki lectures. But also, and another thing we talk about is she's, along with Peter Ford, on the lectures and help go over the 3 volumes of Tassajara Stories, the first volume of which is coming out in September. So that's enough. Huh? Let's give Wendy a call. Well, let me mention one other thing. She put together a book of her husband's unpublished work from a great deal of Robert Pirsig's unpublished work called On Quality. So check that out. And but listen, now let's give her a call, huh? And let's see what Wendy Pirsig has to say.
Hi, David. So nice of you to call.
Yes.
All right. No, sorry.
Yes.
Great to hear your voice.
Yeah. Well, it really is good to hear your voice. You've got a really good voice. It's good to hear you from all the time we've worked together. And
we've always been typing, just type.
Right. For years.
Yes.
My goodness. Yes. And I'd like to thank you again for all your wonderful work with the Shunryu Suzuki lectures.
Oh, you're welcome. It's been a pleasure and a joy. The little bit that I've done has been has contributed to my understanding and practice. I mean, it's tied in. I think it started because you, at one point during early in the pandemic, I think, put out a little word on some podcast or other. If I remember correctly, you said, "Is anybody out there in Radio Land interested in doing any editing? We could use a little bit of editing," or something. Is that what happened? Do you remember that at all?
I don't remember. You've been wasn't I in touch with you anyway before that?
Yes, we had been in touch. Well, you had occasionally corresponded with my husband, very occasionally.
Right.
So we had an email connection, and then maybe in the late 20-teens, we might have written about something. I know one of the things that I was involved with. I was getting ready to move to be closer to my daughter, and I knew that I was going to do that when my husband died. And so I was kind of trying to get clutter organized, even not knowing how much time we had to continue living together in Maine. I just knew the day was going to come when I needed to move. So I was going through a lot of papers, and up came some letters from Marion Mountain. Marion
Derby Mountain.
Derby.
And wait a minute, her married name after Derby, she married Jack, was Wisberg.
I think you and I might have been corresponding about that because I knew you had an archive or that you were working with archives.
Right.
And I thought maybe these would fit. And so you and I were corresponding a little bit about that.
Right.
And that's so that we kind of went back. And eventually, I think I scanned everything and sent you scans of hers.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so it was that. And then Bob passed away. I moved, and immediately we were into the COVID situation, and I had nothing to do but listen to podcasts. And so I enjoyed them. Meeting you that way, and I always had a soft spot for archives. Anyhow,
yeah,
I had done museum work for years and years, and I really had I really value how the archival record helps people understand things, and so I had an affinity for everything you were doing on Cuke.com and making it accessible to people and so forth.
Right, right.
So somewhere in there, it might have not been something you did very often, but I think you let it be known that if someone was available to do a little bit of editing or transcribing, or I don't know how it was put out, but I answered the appeal.
Every once in a while I say something like that. I might have just said, "Hey, if you'd like to help us out," but anyway, yeah. So I knew, like you said, we'd been in touch, and you got in touch and said, I'd like to help. So I'd just like to point out for the listening audience that since then you have gone over zillions of Shunryu Suzuki lectures to make sure the verbatim were verbatim. You have created new verbatims, and you have gone over the lectures to create light edits or minimum edits. That's something that's been happening since, I think the first ones might have been in 1999. The first ones done for Cuke.com, for Cuke Archives. Other people had made something like light edits. They'd edited Suzuki's lecture through the year, Tom Kabarga, Barry Eisenberg, Brian Fikes. I don't know. It's amazing.
Not that I did, but that anybody did, you're talking about.
Yeah. Well, there was a guy named Gordon Geist that started it for Cuke.com.
Yeah. So these are people I don't know. I just know of them that I'm kind of following in their footsteps.
Right. He was an early Suzuki student in the early 60s, and he moved to Norway and got married. And, he's just started sending me corrections, actually, of not of anything, there was no audio then, corrections of lectures I was putting up. He said, well, actually, he got the Blue Cliff record book that Suzuki was speaking from and showed there were some typos in the old wind bells. He was very exact. So he started that off.
Yeah.
So I appreciate all that. And it's amazing that it keeps happening. And most of your work shows up on ShunryuSuzuki.com, and without much credit, maybe your initials at the end of a
I think my
file.
name's there quite a bit at the end of the. I don't know. Doesn't Peter Ford?
Oh, he
put
does.
a note at the end of
Yeah, he puts your whole name there. He does.
Sure.
And mainly you work with Peter Ford. And I'm just sort of hovering up there, and I get questions. And I go, yeah, that's great. It's wonderful.
Right. It's good work for me. And what's been perfect about it for me is that it tied in chronologically with my reconnecting with Zen.
Mm-hmm.
As I mentioned, I moved to Massachusetts after my husband died to be closer to my daughter and her family, and lo and behold, there was a Zen Center here. Joan Amaral leads Zen Center North Shore, north of Boston, and that's exactly where I was headed. So I met her on Google, or I learned of this just by Googling. Is there anything meditative near me? And this was 5 years ago, or 5 or 6 years ago. Around the time I moved was 2019, and I think I drove down. It was about an hour from where we used to live to where I am now, so it wasn't that far. And I think I drove down for a couple of sits on Sundays, just to get acquainted. And I've been practicing more and more, and it's so working with the Suzuki talks that I've been doing the light edits on. It's been wonderful to me because I get to listen to them and think about them as though I were sitting there, and it all ties in with my practice now. And I also feel that, especially because my teacher is the what am I thinking? Grandchild of Mel Weitzman.
Well, if you don't mean the blood grandchild, you mean the dharmic grandchild.
No, I don't at all. I mean, so my teacher, Joan Amaral, her teacher was Blanche Hartman, and her teacher was Mel Weitzman, and his teacher was...
And Blanche's teacher was also Suzuki.
Okay, all right, okay.
Yeah.
But it's a nice thing for me to feel that connection. So I'm very happy to do my little assignments that come from you and Peter. It all fits very nicely for me.
Yeah, well, it's great. It's great. You've made the archive so much better, and so you were going to say something.
Oh, I just was going to ask. I don't have any sense. I like the way it's working, where I don't have any real sense of what needs to be done, or where we all are in the mountain of work that has been done or still needs to be done. I just, when there's an assignment, I work on my one assignment and send it back. So I don't know if there's a lot more of this or what. Do you?
No.
You don't know?
No, I'm always surprised that there's still more work. It seems endless. I remember once reading about the Mark Twain archive, which was in San Francisco. And, this is like 30 years ago I read about it. But there were 5 people working on it. 5 people working on the Mark Twain archive. And I thought, how could it possibly be more than something somebody would do, one person, in a couple of months, But now I see, and it's sort of endless. And
And then the recordings got so much better. I mean,
yeah.
some of the first recordings that you had me work on, I really had to struggle with understanding. And then they got so much better because of the work of who?
Well, work of
Something got a
various
lot
people,
better with the audio. Yeah, okay.
you know, Charlie Wilson and Shindo David Hay with Engaged Wisdom did a lot of really good work on the
Yes.
audio. But there's been, you know, other work, and I've taken some of it and used AI to make it
Yes.
clearer. But you know, I spent a bunch of time on that. And then I decided, you know, AI in like 2 years is going to be so much better, and it's already better than when I was doing that. That it's better to wait. I think it's all pretty good now. Well, no, there's lectures that you worked on that I couldn't believe you could hear and make distinctions and transcribe it. And I can't believe that people transcribed them all those years ago.
Back then. I know. Yep. Well, at least they had those little cassette recorders. That's all they were using in those days, right?
Well, at first they were using reel-to-reel. Marion Derby used reel-to-reel recorders.
Oh, were they?
Her recordings were better, were very good. And although a lot of those were lost, but you know, there's enough remains. And then at Sokoji they started recording with reel-to-reel, but then it moved to cassette, like an office cassette, not really good quality. And there was a lot of really bad recording done. Not even, you know, that it could have been a lot better with the cassette. And all sorts of things. Oh, and batteries dying out. So
dying, yes, right, yeah.
Yeah, so there were enormous amounts.
We're lucky to have them.
Yeah. The the motto or something of Cuke Archives that I've quoted many times is when Philip Whalen said to me, you know, I said I was bemoaning the loss of the library at Nalanda when the invading Muslim hordes burned it down. And Philip Whalen, who lived across the hall from me at Page Street, said, "Oh, David, just enough survives."
I know. You've told that story. I love it. I mean, it's a real archivist story. And that's true. I mean, that's what we've got, and it's a treasure, and I don't bemoan anything that's lost.
One of the greatest losses in recorded history is the sacking and burning of the library at, where was that, Alexandria?
I knew you were going to say that. Yeah.
Where, you know, like all known knowledge from the Greek, the Mideast, Roman, everything, all that was. And I read there was a historical society that had a dinner and party every year to celebrate the destruction of the library at Alexandria.
Where was this, or when were they celebrating? Now or back then?
No, modern times.
A contemporary one.
Yeah. But
Why?
I read that decades ago. It was a literary society or an archiving society or something in England.
Yeah.
And I could not, I asked ChatGPT to find a mention of that. It couldn't find anything. But I think one of the greatest losses, I've thought about this, there was a Chinese emperor. I think was it the one who built the wall, like when he goes back to known Chinese history, who destroyed all knowledge. He had everything destroyed to start all over. And scholars were told if they didn't destroy it, they'd be buried alive. So that was a massive destruction of, a whole enormous amount of knowledge and history and everything that hasn't been that well recorded by the West until recent, the last century. So I think we're going through a period like that in America now, where
because of destruction of information and distortion of information.
The Trump administration, it's really Project 2025, which I think the media should make a bigger deal of. He doesn't care one way or another. He's just letting them. They're destroying scientific. Scientific research. The whole labs are just being vacated, and also, in history, they're going after universities. They're going after the Smithsonian. It's happening fast, and it's happening. Faster, than the news can report it. And the news just keeps reporting the new one, so people forget the old one, The
old ones, it's a real calamity.
Yeah. We'll see what happens. All right. In contrast to that, I don't want to say and on the other hand, because this is not really on the other hand, but I'm going through a time in my Zen practice where I think about and wonder about what I understand. I mean, I've been practicing Zen since 1976 in some form. But as I said, more intensively now. No, I'm not at a monastery, but I do have a local lay Zen center where I practice, and I've gotten so I think a lot about what it is that I know, and how did I know it, or how did I learn it. So, this is in contrast to the destruction of information that we were just speaking about. I mean, there's also the teachings that got passed down, warm hand to warm hand, where there was nothing written down, that we've gotten something passed along to us. And I don't have anything profound really to say about it, other than for some reason lately I've been thinking about it a lot. Well, there's the written, there's the written teacher, and that has been an enormous amount of that have been passed on, and there's the unwritten teaching, which is passed on from person to person. That's always happens.
Yep. And I find it fascinating now to think about what is, especially now that I'm old and I've forgotten so much of what I've read about Zen, for example. And so what is it that I actually know, and where and how did I know it? When did I know it? I'm doing a little Watergate joke here, but I'm not saying it. I'm not expressing this very well, but coincidentally, you're talking to me at a time where I've just been really reflecting on this and saying, well, what do I know, and how important is? I feel like it's really important to my life, but I don't know, and that I've got it in ways that don't really involve language, written language or verbal language. For example, I remember my first teaching about Zen came from my husband, who had been studying with Katagiri Roshi. And Bob was not a qualified teacher, and yet there he was teaching me in 1976 how to sit, where to put my feet, where to put my knees, how to hold my hands. And I remember there was time recently, fairly recently, where Joan was leading a group in the local library. She does some community Zen, introductions to, you could just walk in off the street and do some zazen and some talking and that kind of thing. And so she was explaining a little bit about posture, and she was explaining the mudra, hand mudra, and using me as an example. And I thought later how funny it was, because nobody had ever taught me how to position my hands, except Bob, who had never been formally trained and who had probably been taught by Katagiri. And it's just funny how it is to think about that.
Yeah.
That I stayed with it all that time.
Yeah, I feel that Dharma is passed on, not only through so-called enlightened teachers, but it's passed through by many, many people in many ways. It's passed on by student to student, and student to teacher, and teacher to student,
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, Bob to me was definitely student to student, and yet it was good enough to get by with.
Yeah. So, let's go back, and I'm going to do a way-seeking mind journey. Well, first, where were you born?
Oh, I was born in Concord, New Hampshire, not too far from where I am now.
Yeah, what year?
Over. 1950.
Ah.
And all my childhood was in New Hampshire. Was little, different places in New Hampshire. Until I went to college.
Yeah.
And so I don't know, where are we going with this?
So you came from the home of Transcendentalism. What sort of spiritual teaching was there in your home?
Oh, yeah, not too much. And I've thought lately. I've been thinking about this a little bit. Both of my parents had experiences with kind of tragic experiences with their parents involving religious training. And actually, my husband's had the same situation. So my mother, for example, was her father was born in Canada and French Canadian, and was employed by the textile mills in New Hampshire, and his wife, my grandmother, died in childbirth when my mother was a young teenager, and that reverberated to me with the resentment that she felt, that she blamed Catholicism for the loss of her mother, and not just Catholicism, but any religious education. I didn't get. She was able to go to college and learn secular thinking there, and that's what she taught my siblings and me.
Now, wait a minute. How was Catholicism responsible for your grandmother dying in childbirth?
Because she wouldn't have been pregnant if there was birth control. And of course, we're talking 1912 when there wasn't much birth control anyway. But the way it was conveyed to me in the 1950s, growing up in the 1950s, was any religion was superstition, and so that was a prejudice she had that was passed to me. So I had no religious training as a child other than casual acceptance of Christianity because it was the norm in the community I was growing up. Nobody would have considered saying they were an atheist in a small New Hampshire town in the 1950s. So my parents wouldn't have said they were atheists, but I think they actually were, and that's what they taught me.
Mm-hmm.
But they sent me to a boarding school that was founded by a fundamentalist Christian in Western Massachusetts in the late 1800s that had a rip-roaring, excellent Bible study all through my high school. So as a high school student, I was taking Old Testament, New Testament, a little bit of philosophy, lots of singing of Christian songs, and so as a teen, I became interested in that, and of course all my friends were too, and so there was some exploration there. Interestingly, the school had a very strict philosophy of education, which specified that, and it was not co-ed, it was single sex. So I was there with girls, and all the girls in the morning would be woken up in their dormitories, and we would brush our teeth, get dressed, and get ready to go to breakfast. And then an older student would walk up and down the halls with a bell, and we would all sit in our rooms in absolute silence for 20 minutes.
Oh, that's great.
And that was part of my formative experience when I was 14, 15, 16, and 17 years old. And it was, years later, I hear about Zazen, and I thought, oh yeah, I can do that. I've been doing that since I was a kid. Yeah, so it was a Christian. It was supposed to be prayer, basically, but we weren't supposed to do homework. We were just supposed to sit there, and so we were really not supposed to do homework. We weren't supposed to read. We were just supposed to sit there, and so
right.
So that shaped me in an important way. I know. I knew that later.
That's interesting. So what happened after that?
So I went from that. There was a very, the strictness of that school extended to dress codes and having to wear shoes tied and only playing classical music on Sunday and all that kind of stuff. And I graduated from high school in 1967. Well, what was happening outside of that school in 1967? So I just went to the opposite extreme. I mean, not to the extent that you did, but I went pretty wild in college. I went to Ohio to Case Western Reserve for my first year, and then that wasn't crazy enough. It wasn't anti-war enough. It wasn't hippie enough. And I really wanted to go to San Francisco. I knew that everything was much more to my liking on the coast, but I wasn't brave enough to go. So I wanted to get out of my conventional college to something less conventional. And I was in Ohio, and someone told me about Antioch College, which was Ed Brown's alma mater, right?
Well, yeah, he dropped out first year.
Okay, but so I don't know if I can say alma mater, but anyway, so he was gone by the time I got there. But I that's where I finished college was there.
Yeah,
I did a year in abroad and so forth.
Actually, he completed. He and Alan Winter completed the first year, but
yeah,
they actually signed something. I think they completed it, but at some point they left, and they signed
He's
something.
not a graduate.
Because
Yeah.
Ed they had to fill in why he wasn't returning. I think that's what it was. And
Yeah.
he quoted something he'd read from something his brother had sent. His brother was sitting at Sokoji then, 1964.
Right.
The reason, he said, to go to the mountains and attain true realization. That's what he filled in as his reason for leaving.
Right. Did you use that in Tassajara Stories?
That's in Tassajara Stories, in which you know, because you went over it.
I think I read that recently. Yeah, that's right. That's right. Yeah. So college I was bumbling through, and I didn't really leave there with a career path figured out. But I still felt that I ought to go to California, but I still didn't. I was trying to get into journalism, and this is like in the early 70s. I decided I was going to be a journalist, and but I was not successful. I was having a lot of depression. I wasn't doing drugs in a big way, but I was just on the edge of really getting some substance issues going, abuse going, and I remember somebody who was practicing transcendental meditation in those days sat me down and said, "You've got to try this." And I still can remember being unable to sit in a chair for 5 minutes at the time. You know, I was chain smoking and moving all the time, and just had gone far away from the girl who could sit for 20 minutes every day before breakfast. But it was not long after that I met my husband my future husband, Bob Pirsig, on a sailboat on the intercoastal waterway headed to Florida, and he started talking to me about Zazen and got me sitting Zazen on the sailboat, and we ended up in Fort Lauderdale on this 32-foot sailboat where he lived. You know, his marriage had broken up, so he was alone on the sailboat, trying to write a second book, having finished Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance a few years before, and there I was, and he said, "Yeah, you know, live with me. I'll teach you Zazen." And so that was the start of our relationship, was sitting every morning.
Wow.
And for years, for years we sat. We only lasted in Florida for a couple of years. You know, I did get a newspaper job there, and but our life began with Zazen every morning, 40 minutes, and then tea, and he'd read from the Blue Cliff Record. At that point, his son Chris was in San Francisco, studying. So not only had Bob been, you know, steeped in, to the extent that he was steeped in Zen from Minnesota, the fact that Chris was studying in San Francisco was really important to us. It was a big deal that Chris was there. And of course I didn't know Chris at first, and then eventually I met him. He came and stayed with us on the boat, and then later stayed with us on another vacation in Maine after we sailed up to Maine. So that was my start with Zen. Was just I could still remember the feeling of craziness, you know, wildness in my early adulthood. You know, a failure to get traction on my life, really. You career-wise or just life. I was spinning. I was spinning, and having the experience of somebody, a fellow student, which is what Bob was, explain how I could sit with my legs crossed, and I remember the feeling of like, oh, here's something I can do. Here's something I can just sit on this cushion and not talk for 40 minutes.
Yeah.
So that was my teaching at the beginning, and then so we lived on this boat for a while, and then visited Bob's father in Minnesota on the occasion just after his mother died. It happened that 7-day sesshin was starting right after. We had come to Minneapolis for his mother's memorial service. It was just a family gathering, and Bob somehow learned that Minnesota Zen Center was doing a 7-day sesshin, and he talked Katagiri into letting me. I'm a complete newbie, neophyte from Katagiri's point of view, but he let me do the sesshin, and so that was a real. Huge experience for me to survive a sesshin after just I'd been practicing, I guess, for a couple of years, but I hadn't, but not in a sangha. It was, so all the oryoki and the bells and all the stuff was coming at me really new, but in a positive way. I didn't feel like I needed to live in Minnesota forever after. We were living somewhere else, but it was still, I accepted it and took it on board.
Mm-hmm.
And that
now you said oryoki. Would you
Yeah.
explain what oryoki is?
Oh, sure. Yeah. So I have a kind of a vivid memory of going to the Minnesota Zen Center for a brief orientation at the start of the sesshin for new people, and being a set of bowls were provided that I had never used before for formal. How do I say what oryoki is?
It's a formal eating ceremony.
Okay. Yes. Which I had never done before, and I think Bob he was not interested in it, so we never did it on our own. In fact, he scoffed at it, as I recall.
Yeah, no, I can understand that. Certainly.
But he did it for the sesshin, as he had done other sesshins before I knew him in Minnesota, and so we went through we learned how to use our bowls and did that formal practice.
Mm-hmm. There's there was a German couple here, students of Richard Baker's, that had morning practice, zazen and oryoki breakfast. The husband died, unfortunately. They're very close friends. Motor scooter, actually, sort of accident. But anyway, they were doing it at home, but it's very rare for me to hear of anyone doing oryoki outside of
at home,
Tassajara or, a
Right.
practice center.
Right.
Yeah.
Right, yeah. So that was part of my week in Minnesota that year. But
Yeah.
it happened that a few months, that was in September of 1979, and 2.5 months later, Bob's son Chris was murdered while he was at San Francisco Zen Center, and we went back to California for the funeral and remained for 6 weeks at Zen Center.
And that's when we met.
And that's when I met you. Yep. And that coming right sort of on the heels of the practice in Minnesota and and Bob's in my at-home practice, something really got nailed to my being or something. It was just, that much time, and of course, because of the circumstances of the tragedy in our family, I was just really, really paying attention to everything, and so it was a gigantic experience for me that never, that has never left.
Right. And I would like to point out here that you wrote a long piece about it, which is on Cuke.com.
Yes.
And also, you've got a bunch of stuff on Cuke.com, and there's material on Chris and you and Bob. Probably all you have to do is go to Cuke.com and write Pirsig, Pirsig, in the site search box of Cuke.com, and I'm sure that will be enough to take you to a page for Wendy Pirsig.
Yes, and Chris also.
And Chris.
Yeah, that's
and
nice
Bob
to
Pirsig.
have that there. And it happened that it was just for coincidental or fortuitous or whatever, that the events that I'm describing, both in Minnesota and in San Francisco Zen Center, occurred at a time when I was journaling ridiculous amounts. It was just part of my development. I'd been trying to become a journalist, and I just wrote. I had all these notebooks, and I just wrote. And of course, they've been of no practical purpose all this time, but now they're in the Cuke.com archive. So there's some they're there anyhow.
Yeah, it's quite a piece. Well worth reading.
So it's funny because after that, there was a time in our stay in San Francisco Zen Center that Bob and I actually thought of staying there for the rest of our lives, and then it wasn't quite right, and we did visit on another occasion years later. But as far as practicing with a Sangha, either there or anywhere else, Bob was always pretty much of a loner, and he never wanted to do it. And I did. I really would have liked to practice in a formal setting some of the time, but we weren't at a place. We weren't located anywhere where there was really a convenient Sangha near to us, anyhow. But when he passed away, it just welled up in me, like, this is what I've got to do. In fact, I one of the first things that I ever did was call Tassajara on the telephone and say, can I come and live out there? I didn't know that you couldn't do that. You couldn't just cold call and, go and live at Tassajara. But I considered it if they would have said yes. It was towards the end of the guest season period, I guess, and they kind of steered me that way, and I never did in fact go because I moved to Massachusetts, and my teacher brings Tassajara to my door a little bit.
Well, did you go with Joan in the group she took to Tassajara?
No, and she's rather, I don't know, I was going to say annoyed. I don't think she's really annoyed with me, but I've decided I just don't want to get on airplanes anymore. Not that I'm fearful, like, so many people, of being up in the sky and having a plane crash, but it's not, it just doesn't feel right. It's 75, which I just about am, to be using jet fuel up if I don't need to. And I just don't feel that I really need to. And partly, David, it's because of Tassajara's stories. It's a little bit because of that. I mean, I think I read that manuscript 3 times.
Well,
Or-
you read the first time you read it, it was about half as long, or a third as long as
Maybe so.
the third time you read it. So a lot of it you read 3 times. A lot of it you
Yeah.
read 2 times, and some of it you read 1 time.
Well, I was speaking about why I'm not going to Tassajara, even though I only, I don't know, 7 or 8 years ago I was really intent on going to Tassajara. There's something about my age. I've just transitioned into away from being a person who would get an idea about an experience I would like to have, and then I would go and pursue the experience and fulfill the experience. And now I'm less interested in that. I really don't like to sit on airplanes for long periods. And so I probably will not go to Tassajara. They're going to go again this summer. So
Is that right?
Like this will be like the 3rd time. And I think Joan had a practice of going there almost every summer by herself.
Mm-hmm.
And then it was I think 3 years ago, it was probably in 2023, that she took the first group from our Sangha, and it really worked well for everybody. And so she did it again last summer, and I know she's got it planned for this summer too. So it benefits all of them, and it benefits me when they come back, and I get to sit with them, but I don't have to go on an airplane.
I can understand that. I have very little interest. I've flown out of Bali. I had to fly out for visa stuff years ago to Kuala Lumpur and Singapore. And when we first came, we went to Thailand. That was 11 years ago. We went to Thailand and Japan for months.
Right.
And I've flown to Germany because they fly me. And
you had a wonderful trip last year there, and aren't you going back?
Yeah, they're flying Katrink and me there for a Bill Porter Red Pine is doing a seminar, and I helped arrange that.
That's wonderful.
In October 3rd, 4th, 5th. But I really am not interested in getting in a plane and going anywhere. But yeah, I understand. To me, walking to the beach, like I only do that about once a week now or something, and walk around the neighborhood. We don't
Is
have
your granddaughter?
Our granddaughter's here, right? Lucia, one of our granddaughters.
So she was getting you to the beach sometimes.
Right. I'm going to the beach more now because she's here. She's going to be 7 in a little while with her mother, and they're great. They're wonderful guests, and we're really having a nice time. They're here for a month.
I saw a nice picture of her with you on Facebook today.
Yeah, her
picture.
father Clay. Rita's like his ex. She sent him a whole slew of pictures, and he just made him an Instagram sort of string. It's like just one picture, but then you just hit an arrow and go to the next one. And there was like about 12 of them. Yeah, we were at a little ceremony for the blessing of a jewelry shop in, an hour and a half from here in the country.
Yeah.
And actually an area now that is getting overrun with villas not really hotels. What do you call them? Places to stay for tourists because it's so beautiful, the rice fields and everything. So we have some connection with him. So he came and picked us up. And that was good because they got to experience, it was hours people hanging around. And Lucia, she just immediately started hanging out with the kids there. There was only one of
Really?
them that spoke any English. And yeah, it
But
was
they
great.
communicated anyhow. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's
It,
going to be such a big memory for her. She's old enough to. You said she's 7,
she's almost 7.
so that she'll remember it forever. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
wonderful.
Yeah, she was here when she was 10 months also.
Yeah.
So where were we in your saga there? One thing I wanted to mention is you published a book of Bob's in recent years called On Quality, right?
Yes, that's right.
Tell about
And
that.
that ties into the conversation about archives again. And I said I was going through papers and organizing things as you do when you downsize and move. Excuse me. Bob had been pretty good about keeping his papers together throughout his life. They were not really cataloged, but they were in fairly good order in bankers' boxes and so forth, and also photographs and things. And so during the last, about 5 years of his life, I was kind of going through everything and getting his help in identifying things and identifying people in photographs the way you want to do, and pictures aren't labeled. And so it was, it was kind of a nice opportunity for me to familiarize myself with what he had. He had often talked about publishing more work than he did in his life, but he didn't really produce the writing for it. He never liked writing, and he just didn't do the work. It was tempting to me to think of people's interest in, the way people are interested in historical origins of people who do write or become famous or whatever. And so I was glad to be able to keep some of his early pieces, student work and that kind of thing. And, unsure what to do with them and, if anything, whether to publish or not. And, most of them I ended up giving to Harvard University. The Houghton Library there is special for literary collections, and they were glad to receive them. So that's where most of the papers wound up. But as far as publishing them, I really considered, well, maybe some of his unpublished work should get published. And I spoke with an agent that who had worked with his second book, Lila. This was Lynn Nesbitt in New York, and I went to see her. This was, during the year or two after Bob died, and she did something very good to me. She said, if Bob didn't want something published, why would you publish it? So there were some things that that haven't seen the light of day because he they didn't really rise to the quality of writing that he was able to do later. But one of the things she said was, why not pull together some of the best of what he did do and make it kind of an anthology? And that's what I found I was able to do with some unpublished work, and then some excerpts from Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance and Lila, and some letters. And I pulled things together around a theme which was really the core of his writing, which was quality, which I really wanted to draw attention to, and he really wanted to draw attention to. I mean, people tend to remember the motorcycle trip, and not what he was trying to illustrate, how he was using motorcycle maintenance to illustrate, which was quality. So that was, not a big project for me, and I was fortunate that his publisher HarperCollins was interested in it. So that came out in 2022, I think.
Right.
On quality. Yep.
Yeah.
So I was glad to be able to do that before my brain turns to mush in old age. It was it was a little bit of crunching to pull that together because I'm not a professional editor. But I was glad to be able to pull that off and to have a publisher take it out. So that was good.
Yeah. One thing I regret is I didn't play him the song I wrote for Chris when Chris died. I should have come and played it for both of you. Huh?
Yes, and I've played it now that you showed me where to find it.
Yeah. It's the longest song. And I have over 1,100 songs in my archive, and it's the longest one.
Is it?
It's, yeah. But, I just felt, I don't know, I was a little shy or something.
About speaking to him about it? And he tended to push people away, too.
No,
right?
No, he didn't push me
No?
away. No,
Oh,
I
okay.
I wrote songs for a number of people who passed on and didn't let their relatives know. In one case, I did. But anyway, yeah. But it's there on in diffusermusic.com. It's called "There's No Birth, There's No Death, and We'll Miss You."
Yes. Well, Bob would have loved that song. Yeah, he would have.
I know I shouldn't have kept it to myself.
But you didn't keep yourself to yourself. When we met you in San Francisco, it was helpful to him. He liked meeting you when we were out there. I know.
Yeah, and that was good. Meeting you all and seeing you around there. That was a unique event, to have parents of someone who died, been murdered, stay around Zen Center for 6 weeks. It was like part of the experience of grieving.
Oh, it was, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, we sat every day with everybody and and participated in lots of things. So it was really good for us.
Yeah, and that's recorded very well in what you wrote.
And got to meet so many people who remained part of Zen Center in so many important ways.
Yeah.
So it was a real precious time for me.
Yeah. Well, look, it is getting to be your bedtime. Is there?
And you got up early to speak with me.
No,
so
I didn't get up early for you. I just don't.
It's not too early. Yeah, right.
I got up at 6:15, but I don't normally turn a computer on for the first couple of hours. Don't look at my iPhone. I walk and sit. So I just sat for about 20 minutes this morning and made some hot chocolate with local Bali chocolate and Sri Lanka Kayumanis. Oh, Kayumanis is it's the red thing. It's cinnamon.
Oh, okay, okay.
Cinnamon.
Oh, wow, okay.
Yeah, I could only remember the Indonesian. It's
That's funny. Yeah.
sweet wood. Indonesians
Sweet
call it
wood, is
sweet
that what
wood.
they say? Yeah.
Yeah, and it's big. It's a product of Indonesia. The Sri Lankan is a different. It's different, and so I have some of that. It's really hard to get hold of the Sri Lankan.
Yeah.
So anyway, and yeah, so calling you, I called you at 8, and it's 8 a.m. here and 8 p.m. there. And I called you
That's
a day
right.
early because I got confused on the time, which is not at all the first time. Yeah.
No, it's confusing. The dateline, right? Yeah,
Yeah.
no, this has been fine, and it prevented me from thinking about the conversation too much. It's funny because I've heard
Yeah.
your voice so much over the years, and you've never heard mine. So I feel like, oh yeah, we have these talks all the time, but usually it's mental on my part, I guess.
It's really nice to hear you, and really appreciate all you've done for Cuke Archives, and yeah, you've made my life easier.
Oh, thanks for letting me be a part of it.
Yeah, well, thanks for being a part of it, and it's wonderful. Katrinka and I really love Joan Amaral, and I did a podcast with her years ago.
Yeah,
This is
I
the
remember.
6th. I'm in the 6th year of podcasts.
Yeah, that sounds right.
Yeah, April 1st this month is the beginning of the 6th year, and I've done over 800 podcasts.
Wow.
Good.
Yeah.
Well, a lot of them were the mini podcasts,
Okay.
I used to do the really short ones. Now I just do one a week. And I'm very happy that got to do one with you. Great.
Oh,
So-
thanks. Well, I'm honored to be among the 800, so thank you.
Yeah. Well, it's not 800 people. Let's see, how many people?
That's true. You have to go back to people, too. Yeah.
I think it's about 300. A little less than
Individual.
300 people.
Yeah. Yeah.
I did over 50 people here in Bali. I'd like to do
That's
more
right.
of that. Yeah. But it's hard to get to it, And thanks so much for helping with Tassara Stories, which the first book is coming out September 23rd. And I'm going.
Thrilled.
Yeah, a lot. It had a lot of development since the last time you saw it. And I'm going over the second book now. This is all material you've been over, and all 3 books were done at the same time, the initial work, bringing them to the point to send to a publisher. So the second book and third book are almost ready,
Really? Really?
Yeah, but then almost ready means months and months of work still to do.
But from the publisher's point of view, they're game for doing 2 more.
I don't know.
Is that what you're saying? Oh, you don't know.
No,
that has yet to be decided.
Yeah, I'd sent them the first book. They said, we'll take this one. So
Yeah.
the next 2, I don't know. I've already done the audio book for the first one. And
yes, that's wonderful.
I will be doing the audio book for the second one, like next month or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, because that really helps develop the book. Even though I have to go back and make changes in the audio, it gives me a whole other way to experience it that's very focused. And I found it really helped to do the audio book all very time consuming because I would go over it, multiple times. But anyway, enough of all that.
Well, it's a good thing. It's a good project to have done. The whole project is well worth the ungodly amount of time you've spent on it, because these are stories that nobody else has put on the record in the way you have, and it's an important story. So I'm glad I hope you'll always feel like it was worth time well spent, because I think it was.
Yeah, I don't really know. I don't have much thought about that. I'm sort of compulsive. I just do what I am, what I feel compulsively to do next. So I really don't. I don't think about. I mean, like, it's sort of like Zazen. You don't have a goal.
Right.
In
right.
Zazen.
I was just thinking that too. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But there is some. I think about it some, but that's not what made me do it to begin with. It was just, doing things. It's all right. One way to look at what we do is there's Zazen and doing our duty.
Yes.
That's
yes.
sort of
yes.
like a Hindu way of looking at it. Like you follow your karma.
Yep.
Yeah. So
well, it's fitting that the publishers made it look nice too. I like the way the book looked. I mean, of course, I haven't seen the physical book, but the proofs. The typography was nice and the layout was nice, and I think people will enjoy it.
Yeah. Well, we'll see. That would be nice. Okay. Well, thanks for all you've done. Thanks for sharing your weight-seeking mind story. Give my love and Katrinka's to Joan Amaral.
I will do that, and give mine to Katrinka. Greetings to her from me.
Yes, I will. And thanks a lot, and take care.
Thank you. Have a good day over there.
Yeah. All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.
So thanks a lot, Wendy. That was great. Great to hear your voice. Great to talk with you. Thanks so much for all you've done. And we'll be seeing you, later today or tomorrow in an email. Okay. Take care. Thanks a lot. This has been a Cuke Audio podcast. I'm DC Poobah of Cuke Audio and Cuke Archives, coming to you from sleepy Sanur with Dogge Bandita, Feline Cuchita, and dear lovely Katrinka. And we're wishing you and yours and all of us a grand awakening.